at the end of the day, yeah, everything's a system,
Sure.
right?
Yeah.
And that's, one of the things that we talk about in business. But like with, stand up, it's, you've got to have good material to work with. I mean, I've talked about, when I washed out of an interview process because I fell asleep during the polygraph. I've talked about issues with my back and stuff like that. And just like, yeah, so it's just, as long as you've got interesting stuff that you can talk about, then it's just how you frame it. And that's really all that's about.
Has it translated to content?
No more excuses. No more branding band-aids. The art of positioning. Let's freaking go.
From mowing lawns to getting laid off with a day's notice, then building a landscaping brand that serves as 2 decades of industry experience to now help other landscapers stop working 75-hour weeks and build something worth having. Dave Marciniak, I hear you're a classically trained clarinetist who's played thrash metal guitar in high school. No stranger to repositioning, and that's what this episode is gonna dig into. So, Dave, was that like your first pivot, or was it like proof that you're just, screwed doing things a normal way?
I think it was part of that. I think it was part of just finding my voice and really finding something that really resonated. My dad was a college music professor, so that's why I was really kind of steered into classical music and absolutely loved it. But then I discovered heavy metal when I was in high school and absolutely fell in love. And so it's not something that I obviously was very good at, because it's not something that I've pursued and done long term, but we were loud and we had fun, and that was a big part of what metal's about. So,
and probably a big part of being a teenager as well, where you're like, let's just be as loud as possible, disturb the parents.
Absolutely, and just the t-shirts with the skulls and everything else on it, because I grew up in the 80s, so it was during the Satanic Panic when everybody was freaking out. And the funny thing about it was we were actually, we would have meetings in the church basement where the priest would go over and just be like, whatever you do not listen to these bands. And we'd be like, okay, cool. There's a shopping list to go to Strawberries with, and like, let's pick out those albums next time we're out there. So it was like,
really cool. Note down. All right, cool. Let's do that. But anyway, let's jump straight into this. Now, back into the origin of your positioning, and your story is crazy. You got laid off with a day's notice, which, I mean, now it's quite insane, right? And then launching your business immediately afterwards. How did that abrupt start shape how you ended up positioning the business from day one?
So I didn't really have a choice with how I started the business. So it was July of 2008. So it was the height of the recession, and absolutely nobody was hiring. It was a completely dead market. And I knew that I wanted to keep on doing landscape design. So I really had two choices. I could either go deliver pizzas, or I could start a company and do my own landscape design work. And so I figured this is the time to do it. My wife was completely freaking out. I think she cried for 3 days straight when I got laid off, because we hadn't saved up a cushion for starting the business or anything else like that. She was just absolutely freaking out. But that's where I really started with the positioning of everything, because I knew that what I wanted to be known for was as a killer landscape design company, and someplace that people would go to if they wanted something really unusual, really unique. And so that was where I really started with that whole idea. And then what really kind of reinforced that for me was about a year into being in business for myself. I went and met with a customer, and he said to me, your stuff looks fine, but have you ever done anything that's just kind of out there, outside of the ordinary? And that to me was sort of my glove off, like smack across the face kind of moment, where I was like, oh, really? You want to see something different? I'll show you something different. And that's when I really started pushing to try to get unusual projects and kind of do things with my own spin, my own point of view. So that really made a big difference for me there.
And so I imagine, your expertise. We were talking, I think, on one of your posts about the historical side of landscaping. did that also play into like the unusual side of things? Or, instead of saying, hey, we do unusual gardens, like it's easy to say these things, right? Like,
Yeah.
how did you make sure that it's like actually like you were sticking to that?
I mean, part of it is, they say in art that in order to break the rules, you have to know what the rules are. And so that was learning all the different rules of landscape design, historical styles, and everything else, and then kind of figuring, okay, how can we put a little bit of a different spin on things? Because that was part of it, is just being able to look at things in sort of a unique way and say, okay, we're going to take this older home, but we're going to put a little bit of a modern spin on it because you guys have done a little bit of modernizing on it. We'll do something like that. And then I just got lucky. I got some customers who just wanted to do some bizarre things. I had one of my customers, he opened a distillery that has actually turned into sort of a World War II museum.
Wow.
And so I got to actually figure out how to take fiberglass dummy bombs and how to mount them to stone columns. We actually did the whole design around the distillery to try to make it look like the south of France during World War II. And so we get to do kind of cool stuff. And sometimes it's just dumb luck. You just luck into projects like that.
Would you say it's luck though, or would you say it's the positioning, like, or the wording and the messaging that, say for example, a client told another client, hey, like if you want something weird, or if you want something unusual, go and talk to Dave?
Yeah, I think it's they understand that I'm open to doing pretty much anything and that I'm down for anything. And that's one of the things, one of my contractor clients, kind of a recurring thing that he always asks me is, how the heck do you know that? And that's something where just, because I've exposed myself to so many different things and gotten to do so many different things over the course of my career, like, yeah, I know how to do that. Like, let's go ahead and fold that in. And so customers see that and they just kind of go with the assumption of, well, you've done this, 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 and this. So by all rights, you should be able to do this too. And it works out really well.
Has it evolved as the business grew?
It's evolved a lot. I mean, when I first started, you know how it is when you first start a business, you'll take pretty much anybody. You're desperate. You will do anything. I would have landscaped a doghouse if somebody would have paid me for it. To this day, I'll still landscape a doghouse, but it's going to be really cool and it's going to be totally out there. But over time, it kind of evolved to where I was looking for customers that really had an appreciation for design and the design process. Somebody just wanted, a 20 foot by 20 foot paver patio and, nothing exciting, just very, very basic, just enough to keep the HOA off their butt. Not really interested, not really the kind of thing that I want to do. Whereas if somebody says, hey, I really want to make this space something that reflects me and is something that my family can spend time in every night and we just absolutely love it, then that's the kind of thing that I go for. And that's something that my positioning really goes for, telling people that we create spaces that you are going to fall in love with and that are going to fit you like a glove.
So the message has adapted to speak to that certain level of clientele as you went. Is that what you're saying? It's
been one of the interesting things because when you do a marketing exercise where you're looking at sort of what are the demographics of the clientele that you work with and creating customer avatars and everything else like that, for me, it hasn't necessarily been, oh, people in this income level and above are the ones that are a good fit for me. I mean, one of the things that I've found is folks at different income levels, as long as they have an appreciation for good design and they really want something unique and tailor-made for them, those are the people that we really go after. So that's almost more of a kind of psychographic approach of it, is that we're looking for people that value design and understand what goes into creating a good design, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, if they're earning over $500,000 a year, that's what we want. Those have been some of my most boring clients. So that's not really a good determining factor for me. Again, it's finding your nut jobs that are as crazy as I am and want to do really cool stuff. And I keep looking for those projects that are going to let me do something really neat. So it's more of talking to that sort of like unusual way of looking at things, would you say? Exactly, yeah. So let's step this back and talk to, the work that you're doing with other businesses as well. And you've described looking at businesses when they've hit like the
7 million mark and face a oh crap period, what is actually breaking down in the business during that phase?
So what I've found, having been in the landscape industry for as long as I have, is in a lot of cases the owners have started it. They're very, very hands-on, and they're doing everything. They're wearing all the hats, and so they're, in addition to handling the operations and logistics and running the crews, they're also handling the design part of it. They're handling the sales part of it. They're doing the estimating. They're doing everything. And up to a certain point, that's totally doable. But then you start getting to that like $1 million, $2 million, $3 million range. And all of a sudden, there's just not enough hours in the day for one owner to keep doing that. And so we'll see owners where sometimes the first hire they make is a production manager. So that way they can still focus on sales and design and that kind of thing. And they'll have somebody out in the field that's actually managing the crews and going through it. We kind of service the folks that take the other approach, which is, I want somebody that can handle the design portion of it for me, because that's obviously a huge lift. I mean, depending on the projects that we're doing, we may have a design that is easily 10, 15 hours of design work, and you roll a couple of those into the course of a week, and that's a lot for one person to do in addition to doing everything else that they do. So I think that's, to answer your question, I think that's where things start to break, is when it gets to the point where it's too much for one person to do by themselves, and they haven't quite figured out exactly what systems or what processes they can delegate to somebody else. And where we step in is, if a customer is like, hey, I don't think I have time, I don't think I have the resources yet to hire a full-time designer, but I don't have the time to do this myself, where there is a fractional designer. So we're there when they need us, and we're not an overhead cost when they don't.
Hitting that brick wall, how has brand and positioning played into it from your perspective? Have they just not adapted, what you're talking about in terms of your business?
So I love this industry. I've been in this industry for 30 plus years. I think one of the hallmarks of a lot of people in this industry is stubbornness, and just this idea that, well, if it's not working, if I just push a little bit harder, it'll still work. And I think that's where you kind of see the difference between the ones that hit that $3 million mark and blow through it and move on to greater success, as opposed to the ones who might hit that point and then say, okay, you know what, this is too much. I'm going to go back to just having 2 crews and I'm never going to grow again, which I definitely see a lot of, because they hit that point and they just don't quite have the ability to scale. So I think business owners that are able to scale, and whether that's internal hires, working with external companies and other partners that can help carry some of that load, I think that makes the biggest difference.
That's definitely what I've seen as well. So I think a big part of that is like the balance between that mindset, being open to, hey, we need to pull ourselves out of that business, like instead of being in that day to day. And also like, okay, how do we manage the team? How do we like hire well so that it's growing well? And then in terms of like, for example, positioning, how do we make it so that we're not looking like, overlapped on top of every single landscaper, every single like residential home builder, every single accountant? Like, yes, things might look different, but then if you go through from an external point of view, it's still like similar sort of wording across the page.
Yeah, and I think that's one where, in the landscape industry, I think where the opportunity is for them to differentiate themselves, there's 2 points. I mean, one is service and one is design. And obviously everybody is going to say, oh, we've got the best customer service, we take care of our clients better than anybody else. And that's one of those, okay, well, show me, don't tell me sort of things. Whereas on the design end of things, if you've got great design, that's what your portfolio is showing, that's what your website is showing, and you've actually got those assets to lean back on to show customers, hey, look, this is what we do, this is what we're capable of. And again, that was kind of a big part of how my business got to be successful, was no matter what the project was that I was doing, if it was a $3,000 foundation planting, I was putting the time in to make sure that thing was designed perfectly and beautiful and everything else, so that customers could look at it, because your average customer is not going to have the design language to be able to say, oh, well, it looks good because of this, and this. But they know when they see something like, oh, that looks better than that, so I want that. And really, those are the emotional buttons that we're going for. So I think with how landscape companies differentiate themselves, or really any other company, I think it's things that you can do where, again, you're showing them and not just telling them, I think make a big difference from a marketing standpoint.
Especially with what you did in your own business and focusing on that unusual landscapes. Like it's going beyond just the visual side. It's like, hey, this is what we want to be known for. And that could apply in any business. As you said, like anyone can say our service is great. In fact, that should just be the baseline. That should just be the expectation. Like, of course, your service should be great. And they're like, oh, but our competitors, it's not. Well, it doesn't matter. It'll be too late by the time the customer recognizes that. So it's like what you mentioned before is when they can see themselves in that work, when they can see themselves in the style of their communication, for example, or the style, the voice. And I know like you're big about like the voice in design as well.
Yeah, and I think part of that is so much what we do is storytelling. And one of the things that I always harp on, especially if I'm advising somebody on how to sell design better, sell landscapes better, at the end of the day, we're storytellers. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to understand from our customers, what is that story you have in your head of what a Saturday night with your family outside is going to look like. And then we learn that and we tell that story back to them so that we can understand, hey, Saturday night, you're going to go outside, you've got your outdoor kitchen, you're going to make a beautiful meal with your family outside, and then you're going to go to the fire pit over here, and you'll be roasting s'mores, at 10 o'clock at night. And then everybody can just kind of wander back upstairs and go to bed. But you've got this beautiful outdoor setting, and this is where you're spending time as a family. And that's something that has been a great approach for me in terms of just sort of popping the top of their head open and poking around inside and saying, okay, this is what they want, this is what they value, this is what they love, and let's figure out how we can turn that into a story that gives them what they want, and that informs the design, and then that informs the sales process.
That is such a brilliant example. And I know there's so much content out there around like just do good storytelling, just tell a great story. But what you mentioned there, it's not tell the story of how we came to be, tell the story of one of the customers' experiences. This is very much looking at what their experience would really feel like touching on all the senses where you can, like what does that feel like, what does that smell like, what's that emotion involved, and targeting those things and talking to those things in specific that you mentioned. That a lot of storytellers, they're focused on the details. Like, you need to do this needs to be written in this way, but those are the important parts.
Yeah, and really it's making sure that we're not telling our story, we're telling their story, and that's why it resonates with them. That's because at the end of the day, put 15 in landscape companies in front of them, you're going to have a whole bunch of them that will happily tell their story, and this is what we can do, and this is what we've done. But at the end of the day, the customer, it's the whole hero's journey thing of where you make the customer the hero, and they're actually the ones that are experiencing that story that you're telling. And that makes all the difference in the world.
Yes. So, okay, speaking of the client journeys, you mentioned a client when we were talking before about you were working together, or you're still working together. It's been 8 years and they're pushing towards 3.5, 4 million this year. What's that journey actually look like in practice?
So it's been really, really gratifying to watch. I mean, one of those things where obviously I'm a part of it, but it's not like he got there 100% because of me. He got there because he's a really, really smart guy, and because he had also partnered with, he's got a fractional CFO, he's got marketing teams, he's got other people that he has relied on. And again, sort of to the thing we were talking about before, where companies hit that certain size and they just can't scale beyond it because they can't envision what that looks like to not have their arms wrapped around everything. This customer of mine has always had this mindset of he's building a business. And so he wants something where he's got other people taking care of different aspects of the business, people that do it better than he does. And then that way he can grow the business and kind of steer the ship the way that he wants to. So it's been a really neat journey to watch, because he went from doing just very, very basic, unexciting projects, the kind of things that everybody does when they first start off with. He had started working with another landscape designer who was okay. I mean, they're fine. And then so he started working with me, and I said, okay, let's take everything, let's turn it up a couple notches, and let's really just make it something a lot more special. And then that just sort of compounded to where then customers were seeing these more exciting jobs and then wanting to do something. Oh, well, if you've done that, you can do that. If you've done that, you can do that. And so he went from his average project size of being 20 to 40,000 to, now in a year, he's regularly knocking down $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 projects. And it's been neat to watch, because again, he is so smart and he's so sharp, and the way that he's doing his growth is really, really intelligently thought out, and he's taking advantage of having other partners that he can lean on to sort of fill in those gaps that he doesn't have, or just, even might not have time for.
Have there been any pivots or repositioning along the way to adapt to this growth?
The biggest pivots that he's made is just really focusing on being perceived as more of a high-end landscape design build company. So he's gone from being just sort of your kind of standard, we do a little bit of everything, to, hey, these are the types of projects that we focus on. These are the project minimums that we have, and really making it clear to the customers that, hey, if you work with us, you've got expectations, but we also have expectations too, that this is going to be something that we do. So that's been really smart to see.
How would you suggest, or how would you get a landscape owner or owner in general to let go enough to be able to scale practically beyond just, hey, trust your team?
That's a hard one. I think I will say, I feel like in the last 5-6 years, I'm seeing more and more landscape business owners that are just much more willing and understanding of the fact that there's only so far that they can take it themselves. And so I think there's a lot of different organizations around, peer groups and other landscape sales organizations, things like that, to where they're actually able to see in real time other businesses that have taken these steps to grow. I think, again, it kind of comes down to the whole show me, don't tell me kind of thing. I think they're able to actually see other companies that have said, okay, I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to take my hands off these levers, and these levers, and I'm going to let somebody else handle that part of it that is more qualified or has more time, or, whatever the reasoning may be. And they're watching these other companies do that, and they're saying, oh, okay, I get it. That's how that works. And that's why I should be doing that. So, because it's, as a business owner, you know how it is. You want to do a little bit of everything, and it's, God knows I've certainly been in my own way enough times in my business. And, with the pivot that I've done to Landscape Design Lab, that's one of the things that I'm really focusing on, is I am just bringing in people that are good at the things that need done, and I'm just staying out of the way. So there's no more DIYing anything on my website. There's no more handling all my marketing stuff and everything else. That goes out to other people that can do it more efficiently and smarter than I can, because, you always want to feel like you're the smartest person in the room, but let's be honest, I'm certainly not. So it's, it's figuring out how to get out of your own way and let your business succeed.
Yes, big time. That's exactly what I see too. I mean, like, we're so much inside, let's say, the wine bottle, that we can't see that label. And that's where, I see many services service businesses get stuck too. The owner knows they need to let go, but the systems, the positioning, they're not clear enough for anyone else to carry it.
Yeah.
So before you scale or can make a clean break in any direction, you need to know where your positioning gaps actually are. And speaking of which, I've built a brand health check that diagnoses exactly that, plus gives you immediate actionables to work on right away. You can get your hands on it to check your business from the show notes. Now, Dave, speaking of clean breaks, you're shutting down Revolutionary Gardens entirely rather than transitioning it into something new. Walk us through like that decision. Why that clean break versus, say, an evolution?
There's a long story and a short story version of it. The slightly longer version of it is about 3 years ago. I was finally doing a lot of the projects that I'd always wanted to do. I was doing multi-million-dollar homes. I was doing all these high-end projects and everything else. And I just kind of got to a point where I was kind of realizing, this is cool. I'm getting to work with bigger budgets and do some really cool homes and that kind of thing, but it was just not everything that I thought it was going to be. And then I started looking at where I was enjoying myself, and I was working with my contractor clients and being a part of their growth and kind of seeing how we can take it from, okay, you're at this point now, but with great design, we can move you to this point, and watching them grow. And so that was a lot of fun. And so I started laying the groundwork for being able to make that transition. And then this is the year that I decided, okay, I'm 50. It's time to just go for it and make this big transition and this big change. And I kind of feel like it's one of those things that's really hard to have a foot in both worlds. I can either focus on the design build side of things, or I can focus on my contractor clients and I can focus on what their business needs. And so that was the reason for the clean break on this, because this is something that I love doing. I love being a part of their growth and helping them make the business what they want it to be. So that was the big reason for making that clean break.
And that makes a lot of sense, because at the end of the day, you've had that built up association to what you do at Revolutionary Gardens, and suddenly having to change that up overnight, it's a bit of a jarring feeling for customers, for people who have been following along. So just moving it to something new, or like setting up something new, I feel like there's a lot of brands that could learn from that instead of being like, hey, actually, we're going to be doing this, and it's so confusing for everybody.
Yeah, and that was a big part of it, and that's something that with my website designer, that's something that we've really gone through in detail. Is I don't want it to be something where somebody lands on my website and is kind of like, well, is this for homeowners? Is this for contractors? Like, what do I need to do? So really putting my value proposition out there as clearly as possible and saying like, no, this is what we do. This is who we work with. This is the kind of projects that we do. And so really trying to make it as straightforward as possible.
I imagine you also advise on that in terms of the your clients that you're working with. Hey, let's make sure that this is a clear thing when you're coming onto the website or coming at any point of contact. Yep. Say they get on the phone, to have it consistent of how you're seen, how you're remembered.
No, absolutely. And I mean, that's something that, I've been wanting to make this transition for a while now, so it's been really, really exciting to do it, because I've kind of felt like this is sort of where all the roads have led me to. So I definitely want to make it, again, go all in with it and really make it something exciting.
So we've talked about these really smart moves that you've made, but have there been any in the other direction, like the biggest positioning mistake that you've made in your own business across these 2 decades, or similar kinds of issues?
I mean, I've made so many mistakes. Enumerating them all would just be really, really hard. But I mean, one of them, obviously, when I first got started, was again just taking on any project and every project and not really worrying about whether it fit what my vision was and what I wanted to do, and that was a big one. And the thing is, once you've got a crew that you're working at keeping busy and making sure that, you're providing for 3 other households and making sure that they're good to go, you do still end up compromising on that a little bit and taking on jobs that may not necessarily be exactly what advances the brand or your mission or that kind of thing. And so I think one of the mistakes that I made was not recognizing soon enough when that happened and saying, okay, clearly I'm not getting the projects that I need to be getting. Why am I not getting those? And what do we need to do to get back on track to get those? Because it's easy to get mired in that whole, okay, now we're just doing production type jobs and just trying to bring revenue in the door and kind of keep the lights on, keep everybody working. And you don't really have time to go, okay, what's going on with my funnel that there's not the good jobs coming into the top of my funnel? So, I mean, that's probably one of the bigger mistakes that I made was just, and it happens to everybody where you just get into the weeds, you're just super busy and you see busy as, okay, that's fine, but you're not really advancing your mission and what you're trying to do.
So it's really just getting out of, I want to say your own mind, but it's like getting out of like that day to day and being like, let's look at the business almost from a third party perspective of like, okay, what's going with the finances? Why is this happening? So how have you approached, like, when you recognize that happening? Like, was that you took some time away and then you recognize that happening? Or was it like, okay, I'm going to set myself 3 days, a week away to go through like the whole business and be like, okay, these are the issues. This is where like I'm catching warning flags, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I mean, for me, I looked at it and I said, okay, this is clearly, we're drifting. We're not on the path that we want to be on. And so let's go back to when I was getting the jobs that I want to be doing. Who was I talking to? What rooms was I in? What steps was I taking to get to those? And then getting back on that. And, one of the things, I'm sure with any business, you definitely see it in the landscape business where, especially springtime, you get to where your pipeline is full, you've got a ton of jobs booked, and so you're so busy, you just stop marketing. And then June, July hits, and all of a sudden you come up for air and you're like, holy crap, I have absolutely nothing in the pipeline. And so, that's something where constantly taking that step back and looking at what's in the pipeline and figuring out, okay, where is my next job coming from? Where are my next 2-3 jobs coming from? And if they're not the ones that I want to be doing, why is that? And what do I need to do to get back on that?
And then even as like hiring out as well, like making sure that they're following with that like that's clearly communicated as well. Like, hey, because we're getting this kind of client because we're doing X, Y, Z. How do we make sure that the rest of the team is also doing X, Y, Z, not Z, F, G sort of thing?
Exactly. And again, that's something where leaning on outside professionals can be so helpful because then you get that other perspective where you can say, hey, this is not going the way that I thought it would. What do you think? Because it can be lonely being a business owner. You're inside your own head a lot and sometimes it just takes that extra set of eyes to say, well, yeah, you're being stupid. You're doing this. And, sometimes it just really takes somebody, really, really blunt. They can just hit you with a 2x4 like that and give it to you straight.
That makes a lot of sense. Okay. So if you're advising another business owner stuck at that revenue brick wall that we were talking about earlier and who wants to move up market, what would you advise them, like the first 3 things to do?
So one would be to look at what their positioning is now and look at what kind of customers they're attracting and ask them, have you actually done customer avatars? Have you actually looked at sort of do you know who you're selling to? Do you know who it is that you want to be selling to? I think that's one that if you're trying to go more up market, if you're trying to refine your brand, you may look at that and find out, well, no, if my messaging is anybody and everybody, then that's not going to be something that brings in the higher end buyers for sure. Another thing would be to have somebody that can look at your marketing and how that marketing dovetails in with your sales process, because that's going to then take that information as far as your positioning and who it is that you're going after. And then from a purely selfish standpoint, I mean, I think that they should work with somebody like me to make sure that their projects are designed beautifully. So that way, what their customers are seeing and what their marketing is doing is really promoting where their company wants to end up. But I would say that otherwise, if they're not talking to somebody like me, then working with, whether it be like a really good accountant or a fractional CFO or somebody like that, really figuring out what are the numbers and where can they afford to bring somebody else in to kind of help get them over that revenue hump, because that's a really, again, that's just such a big thing. It feels like in this industry, there's a hard wall there at like 3 or 4 million. And it takes somebody smart doing some planning to get up and over that and move on to the next goal.
We're trying to envision what that situation looks like after they pass that wall, who the kinds of people that they're working with, what are the kinds of projects that they're working on, what does that look like? Yeah. And then, say, for example, hiring out accordingly, looking at the demographics and the target market according to that. Is that...
You can never just look at where your business is today. You always have to be looking at where is that business going to be 2 years from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now, and what that picture is going to look like. Because I don't necessarily agree with the whole mindset of if you're not growing, you're dying. But I think it's easy to stagnate and end up in a place that, especially if you get stuck, that suddenly 5 years from now, you're doing the same thing you've always done and you're not happy with it, you're not enjoying it, and you're not getting what you want out of it. So as hard as we're going to work, I think we need to make sure that we've got a long-term plan and we know how we're getting there.
Ooh, that is really good. Okay, so there is one question that I ask everybody that comes on this show, and that doesn't have to be related to the topic that we've just discussed, but what is the one social norm that you want to push back against?
I told you I thought about this one. And I think it's that men's fashion does not need to suck.
Oh, yeah.
I think that is something that, because I'm a bigger guy. I wear a 3X. And if I don't want to just wear like a basic single color button down or polo shirt or something like that, my options are tie-dye or pay $500 for a custom shirt. It's just not fair that there's not anything exciting or interesting out there. I think men should be able to make actually interesting fashion choices. And yeah, that's the norm that I want to push it back against. Just because I'm a big guy in the landscape business, I don't need to be walking around in, jeans and a just plain solid color button down shirt. That's boring. We don't need to do that.
Let's not have subpar fashion, please. There's only like so limited options that there are for you guys, and even for women, right? Like lack of pockets in dresses. Come on, let's go.
No, exactly. It's like I got pockets, but I'm bored out of my mind. So yeah.
Balance. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dave, for this badass discussion. And to you, my badass listener, thanks for tuning in. You can reach out to Dave from the show notes, as well as access to that brand health check. And if you love this episode, drop a 5-star review. And now, let's go get badass.
No more excuses.
I grew up from a really, really sheltered white bread area in New England, so I do the best I can.
You know how I get around that? I don't know. I just don't use names.
Well, I'm terrible about that because I am terrible about remembering names. And so for me, it's just, hey, buddy, and, all that kind of thing.
I just jumped right into, what we were supposed to be talking about, be it the weather or, so... you get into networking and, there's a name and everything. I'd be like, yo, how's it going?
Well, the worst one was my neighbor across the street. I was convinced his name was Bob for the entire time that he lived there. And I kept calling him, he was a dentist. I kept calling him Dr. Bob. And then one day I needed to switch dentists. So I went to him and I went to his office and I'm like, who the hell is Dr. Mike? And that So at the point where he was actually like, putting tools in my mouth was when I finally figured out that I've been calling him the
And he
wrong name
just
for
didn't
3
say
years.
anything.
He did not say a word. I think what it was, his wife's name was Roberta, and I just had this idea in my head that it was like Bob and Roberta, and it was very cute. And like, I rolled with it. But yeah, I was about as wrong as you could possibly get.
Hey, I mean, as long as he's like, he didn't say anything. I mean, maybe he thought you were saying something else.
I don't know. I mean, he was one of the most chill people I've ever met. So it's entirely possible that he was just kind of like, all right, that's Dave, whatever, and just kind of.
It's your version of a nickname. So. You know, that would fit in really well in Australia because we just shorten everything. And the things that are already like really short, then we'll just go and like lengthen them just for shits and giggles.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, it's, I grew up in New England, so it was everybody's last name had like E thrown on at the end of it. So you'd have like Dougie and Bobby and Mikey and all that. So never really got Davey, but that was just what we grew up with.
So like we have Shazza and Bazza and but then I think based on how we call people, you can see where in the country they're originally from. Any questions ahead of the recording?
I don't think so. It's, I think we went over a good bit. I don't remember all of what we went over, but, it's, I'm very good at yes-anding. So we'll just roll with it.
So you've done, not stand-up comedy. What's the word for it?
No, I haven't done improv. I've done stand-up. I haven't done improv. With improv, there's just a certain amount of quickness that it takes for improv that just scares the hell out of me, and I've just never been willing to give it a shot. But I've done, stand-up scared the hell out of me, which is why I did that, because it was one of those things where I was like, this is, I've always been like, oh, you're so funny and, you should do this. But I recognize that, it's not just as easy as getting up there and just being funny and riffing, because that's the people that think you can do that are the ones that absolutely bomb and make a complete fool out of themselves. And so I saw how much work it was and I actually put the work in, and, I had a lot of fun with it. But like, yeah, it's, improv is just, the good ones are just so quick on their feet. It just blows my mind. I don't think I've got that in me.
God, see, now we're just like uncovering all the golden nuggets. You also did stand-up comedy. Wow, that is so cool.
I've always been kind of a verbose person, so editing myself down has been a big part of it. And so that was where doing stand-up, 'cause if you're doing an open mic, you get 5 minutes. It's a tight 5. You've got to get it. And otherwise you're just getting dragged off the stage, whether you're done or not. And so you kind of learn to be a lot more sparing with your words and, only use the words that you need to use as opposed to just going crazy and riffing off it and everything else. And so, yeah, I think that's helped me with content because I try to be as direct and succinct as I can, even if I'm telling a story or sharing an anecdote or something like that. Like, yeah, I'm just trying to keep it as tight as I possibly can so I don't lose people.
That is so cool. Oh my God, I love that. I hope that gets into the bloopers. We'll see.
No more branding band-aids. The art of positioning. Let's freaking go.